to the channel. Starting with number 3, the intricate dance of urban mobility and human behavior unfolds in fascinating ways, and nowhere is this more evident than in the success of bike-sharing programs in Copenhagen. A city where cycling isn't just a means of transport, it's a way of life. But how did it get here? And what does game theory reveal about this remarkable system? Copenhagen's bike-sharing program isn't just an accident of culture. It's the product of deliberate design, policy, and economic incentives. The city's first formal attempt at bike-sharing, Bicyclen, launched in 1995, and it was rudimentary, coin-operated, heavily vandalized, and inefficient. But here's where things get interesting. Rather than abandon the concept, policymakers analyzed failures like an engineer would a broken machine. Game theory tells us that individuals make decisions based on incentives, so Copenhagen rebuilt the system around alignment of interests. Enter the modern version, Donkey Republic and Bicyclen 2.0, integrating GPS tracking, smart locks, and a pay-per-use model. Suddenly, the Nash equilibrium of bike sharing changed. Users now had real incentives to care for the bikes, as damage was traceable and rentals required deposits. The numbers are staggering. Over 40% of commutes in Copenhagen are made by bicycle, compared to just 1% in most American cities. The infrastructure? Over 385 miles of dedicated bike lanes, meticulously designed to keep cyclists safe. But here's a key factor: perceived cost versus actual cost. Parking a car in central Copenhagen can cost up to $500 per month, while a bike share subscription, just $20. Rational self-interest kicks in. Why pay more for less mobility? And when mass adoption happens, traffic congestion drops, air pollution decreases, and the economy benefits. According to a 2016 study, every mile cycled in Copenhagen creates a net societal gain of 42 cents, while every mile driven costs society 20 cents. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect, Copenhagen's bike-sharing success isn't just about infrastructure or economics, it's about human behavior and cooperation dynamics. The city's social contract has shifted. Studies show that when cycling becomes the norm, social pressure reinforces the behavior. Newcomers quickly adopt it, and defection from the system, opting for cars, becomes less appealing. This is game theory in action, a positive feedback loop of urban efficiency. And the ripple effects? Profound. Copenhagen's model is now influencing global urban policy, from Paris's Vélib to New York's City Bike, each iteration refining the mechanics of collective urban transport. So what's the final takeaway? The key to sustainable cities isn't just policy or technology, it's understanding the mathematics of human decision-making and designing incentives that lead to rational, cooperative behavior. Moving to number 2, stick around. This one's fascinating. The High Line, New York City's radical experiment in urban revitalization. But really, it's a story about something deeper. Game theory in action, strategy, cooperation, unintended consequences, playing out in real time across concrete and steel. So how did a defunct freight rail line, suspended 30 feet above Manhattan's west side, transform into one of the world's most influential urban parks? Originally built in the 1930s, elevated to eliminate deadly street-level rail accidents, the High Line was once a vital artery for industrial New York. Meatpacking plants, warehouses, manufacturing hubs, boxcars rolling in, unloading, rolling out. But by the 1980s, obsolete. Rail freight collapsed. The tracks sat abandoned, overgrown with wild grasses and shrubs, a forgotten relic. And then, a game-theoretic shift. Property owners, eager for new developments, pushed for demolition. The rational play? Maximize land value. But two visionaries, Joshua David and Robert Hammond, saw a different equilibrium. They understood urban game theory, how public goods and private incentives could align. They fought for preservation, but strategy mattered. Simply arguing for beauty? Too weak. They framed the High Line as an economic asset. And here's where the numbers get staggering. The city invested around $150 million in its transformation. Sounds massive, right? But private sector investment in nearby properties surged past $2 billion. Tax revenues skyrocketed. Commercial leases, residential sales, tourism, generating more than tenfold returns. This wasn't just a park, it was a high-stakes economic catalyst. Structurally, engineering challenges were immense. reinforcing 1.45 miles of aging steel, adapting it for pedestrians while preserving historical elements. Design-wise, landscape architect James Corner and architects Diller Scofidio Renfro took inspiration from its wild state, retaining spontaneous plant growth patterns, creating an ecosystem, not just a walkway. And biologically, over 500 species of plants thrive on the High Line today, carefully curated to mimic natural succession. But there's an irony, an urban paradox. Success breeds exclusivity. The High Line, once a grassroots movement, now an elite tourist magnet. Surrounding real estate skyrocketed. Longtime residents priced out. So, was it a win for everyone? Game theory says equilibrium shifted again. The benefits concentrated, the costs dispersed. But one thing's certain, New York never looked at abandoned infrastructure the same way again. Lastly, we will talk about something fascinating, something that reshaped the way cities think about traffic management, London's congestion pricing. Now imagine this, early 2000s, London was choking under traffic, losing nearly 3 billion British pounds every single year due to delays, inefficiency, lost productivity. That's not just an inconvenience, that's an economic black hole. So, how do you fix it? How do you get people to rethink their daily commutes? Well, in 2003, the city introduced a simple but profoundly effective mechanism: pay to drive in central London during peak hours. Now, here's the crazy part. At the time, economists, urban planners, and politicians had debated this idea for decades. The roots of congestion pricing trace back to, believe it or not, Arthur Pigou, an economist from the early 20th century, who introduced the concept of external costs. You see, every extra car on the road slows everyone else down. That's an externality, an inefficiency. And Nobel Prize-winning economist William Vickrey, brilliant guy by the way, argued in the 1950s that the only way to fix this was to price roads dynamically, just like airline tickets. And the results? Within the first year, traffic in central London dropped by 15%, and travel speeds increased by 30%. That's unheard of in urban planning. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Public transport usage skyrocketed. Bus ridership alone shot up by an extra 20,000 passengers per day. The policy didn't just reduce congestion, it forced behavioral shifts. People started carpooling, walking, even cycling more. And the revenue? Over £200 million annually, pumped right back into improving the city's transit system. Now, of course, there were critics. Business owners feared reduced foot traffic. Drivers hated paying more. But studies showed that economic activity remained stable. And other cities? They took notice. Singapore followed suit. Stockholm, New York is even considering it. So, congestion pricing, it's not just about reducing traffic, it's game theory in action. That was the congestion pricing in London, one of the most compelling case studies in urban game theory. We also covered the success of bike-sharing programs in Copenhagen and the transformation of New York City's High Line. So if you missed those, go check them out. Let me know in the comments, should more cities adopt congestion pricing? Don't forget to like, subscribe, support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.